Oh, thank you. So this is the curriculum and evaluation meeting. It's Monday, June 5th, 2017, 5:30 p.m., and we're in the district office at the administration building.
I'll call the roll.
Sure.
Dr. Murataki is absent. Mr. Kaufman is.
Yep.
Mrs. Van Twyver.
Here.
Mrs. Hohensee is here. We also have Cam McIntosh, Mrs. Z.
McIntyre.
McIntyre. Oh, cute. Thank you. Mr. Farrington, we have Dr. Brown, we have Mr. Frederickson, Sherry Fulton, Keith Richards, and Ms. Spustine.
Okay. Thank you. So the conversation tonight, at least I wanted to say, we have two things on the agenda. We'll talk about competency-based grading for about 90 minutes, and then Ms. Fulton's going to come back for the last 30 minutes to speak to the curriculum issues around the Title I purchase that we have a special board meeting for at 7:30. Okay, so with that, I do have an introduction, just to kind of put things in a perspective. First, let me say thank you to the students, parents, and teachers and staff for attending tonight's meeting. I will, off the cuff, sorry Jackie, say the turnout is way better than I thought it would be. We do have the two topics that I just mentioned. The focus tonight is on competency grading and how it's working, how it's been implemented in the district. I would like to hear about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Please defer your comments about the X2 platform for another time. This is about the competency grading itself and how it's working. I am most interested in hearing what parents and students have to say. I see them as unreported voices. The parents and students are the people that have to live with competency grading as students apply to colleges. Teachers and staff, I welcome your feedback as well. To ensure all audiences are heard, I'm asking that speakers sign up for one of the three sheets that are at the end of this table. So there's a sheet for parents, one for parents, one for teachers and staff, and another for students. And we'll just select off of each list. So we won't go down one list and say do all the students first, whatever. We'll pick off the top ones on each list. And as you address the committee tonight, would you please state your name and address, and if you are a parent, student, or staff member. Given the number of people, I'm doing a quick calculation. 10. So let's maybe not more than 5 minutes each, and I think that will give everybody a chance to speak and be heard. So the first thing, I want to answer a question as to why are we even having this. This was a question that was posed in an email. Somebody sent an email to Mr. Farrington, and he replied that he was uncertain why we're even meeting and having this conversation. And I think I owe it to those assembled and the people at home to try and explain why. For me, grading is something that needs to be well understood. It needs to be fair, and it needs to work. And if we hear about problems, I think we owe it to ourselves and the students to hear about them and address them. So to that extent, the first thing I'd like to do, and this was from last weekend, it was a letter to the editor. I redacted the names of the students who were in the, can you guys see that? That's pretty good, huh? So in other words, a student wrote this article, and in it they said, although it has been 2 years since the start of the new competency system, students still regard it with skepticism. Many students are unhappy with the changes in grading, and teachers aren't enjoying the process of entering numerous grades into various competencies. Another student, who is a sophomore, says that the system is messy, confusing, and needs improvement. The recent improvement in only allowing recovery up to a B- has made certain students upset because there is no longer a possibility to improve from an A or an A- to an A+. The competency system has made it almost impossible to get an A+ in a class unless almost every single assessment is an A+. Another sophomore says teachers don't agree on the system and they all interpret it differently. So it's harder to get accurate and proportional grades. Concerned students and parents have been providing lots of feedback on competencies, but there is no change in sight. The issues are not with the system, the issues are inconsistency between teachers. And another reason why students are not big fans is because it has brought down grade inflation, meaning it is now harder to get an A. The main concerns for seniors, however, is how this system affects their chances of getting into college. The GPA generally goes down because of the new recovery adjustment, and the students who want to get to the top tier schools still have a chance, only now it's a little harder. Hopefully, the Board of Education realizes these problems and rectifies them to alleviate student stress. I found the publication of this actual article stressful to me because I felt bad that the students didn't present it to the board. It speaks to, in this paragraph where it says concerned, I don't know if this will highlight, yeah, where it says concerned students and parents have been providing lots of feedback. The board hasn't seen that. The curriculum committee hasn't seen that. So if there is a lot of feedback out there, I really believe we need to get it and to consider it at the board level as our students. How come it's the kids who sometimes have all the wisdom, and we have something to learn from them here, and I think we deserve to give them a voice. So this is the primary reason. But I have one other thing I want to show, and I'm going to put our student member, Mr. McIntyre, Cam McIntyre, on the spot. This is what got my attention last year when I think it was the first day I met Cam. We were at South and we were there for something else. And let me shrink it a little bit so we can get the whole thing on there. Where he had done this analysis to make the point about the competency grading and his assessment of it. Now, I am not going to speak to this chart, Cam. I am going to ask you to do that. This is not rehearsed. I just want you to know he didn't even know I had this slide on my computer. So, if Cam, could you address your concerns that you documented last year? And I absolutely want to know if you still have them.
Yeah, so when I made this last year, it was when we changed from a 100-point scale conversion to a 4-point scale conversion. And when we went to like the quarters, you know, you have like a 4, 3.75, 3.5. The benchmark for an A+ became a 3.88, and in practice, that number is very, very hard to get for a class. One grade is usually something that throws you off from getting it. So what I made here was, in the current system, if in your 3 categories you have 2 A+ and an A-, in this current system we would give that student an A for their class. But in the previous system, if they got the exact same grades, they got the exact same scores on all their assignments in a class, but because they took the class in a different year, they're getting a different grade solely based on the conversion chart that we have to go to numbers behind the scene. So that's why I kind of made that. I think we're rewarding kids the same grades for doing the same work, but it's not being shown in an overall class average.
Do you want me to scroll this down to the other examples?
Sure.
You want to address them?
Yeah, so this one is just another example. So in one of my classes last year, my grades were in that 4-point average column. As you can see, the formative category, if I had taken the class a year earlier, it would have been a 97, which was the old benchmark for an A+. Also in the solve category, it also would have been a 97. And then my overall grade for the class would have also been a 97 instead of a 3.83. So it's just a little bit different, and I think that what we have right now is very high. Because in the next example, I'll kind of show you why.
This is all I have, Cam. I don't
okay.
have any other.
So I have another one too. So if See, in one of my classes last year too, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 A pluses for a category, 1 A, and a B. And that 1 B didn't let you get an A plus for that category. So I think with the 3.88 number, I think it's asking a lot of our students to get that high, because you basically need to be perfect all the time. Like, and sometimes it might be, you know, it might be 1 B, and a B is not a bad grade, but that B is something that might be throwing the kids off like a couple points from that. So that's where I kind of have my concerns with it.
Okay, so mechanically, the way the scoring is working, you're doing the same work, but you're receiving a different grade based upon the grading system.
Yeah, based upon the conversion chart that we made in the district. I don't know, do they have that or no?
It's in the policy.
Okay.
Would you like to see it?
I think I have it.
That's in the policy, right, Ms. Vantueva?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Policy ILBAA-R.
I think. Sorry. I know I downloaded it today. I'm not connected to the internet. And if it's not here, then I'm not sure where it is. Let me just look one quick place, see if it's still in my, it's one of these two, I can tell.
There you go.
Okay. So, give me a second. Is this the chart we want to see, or are we looking at the descriptions on the previous page?
That's the only,
No.
Oh, there's actually a page in front of this.
yes,
Where it
but that's the
describes-
description of the
Yes.
grading scale.
So we want to look at the chart to answer the question I'm asking.
This chart is actually different. It doesn't have, like, you know, what the grades are on it. It just has the number conversions on it. So I actually have a picture of it right here.
That's not true. I mean, the yellow right there is the grade that's input into the X2 system.
Are they different?
What Cam is referring to is the ranges of numbers. So behind the scenes, an A plus goes from a 4.0 to a 3.88. An A goes from a 3.8, so that's just the ranges behind. So that's not, that wouldn't be.
That is the one that's in the policy, sir.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, in order to get an overall grade, it's just the ranges of what you're showing.
So what you have in your hand is a range chart. What we have here is the upper or lower end of that range. Are they the same?
This is just like what the grades are, like how grades are given in class, and then
As compared to what the range is
yeah,
for
so
a
like,
particular grade.
What do
for
you mean?
example, like teachers use that chart to give, you know, an A, a B, or a C, but then when that A or B or C goes into the grade book, this chart is used to calculate your overall average.
Is that chart in our policy anywhere?
No, it is not.
But it's being
That's the
currently-
behind the scenes.
Yeah, behind the scenes map.
That's what X2 does.
Yep.
Okay, so to keep ourselves moving, do you have anything? I have a very specific question, and it has to do with fairness. I really want to know the students believe this system is fair and equitable. So I'm going to ask you, I'll ask others the same
But
question.
before you go on, can I ask
Sure.
one question? Is the scale that X2 uses more generous than the scale that's in the policy?
No, I wouldn't say so.
It's not a wider scale than what's in the policy?
No, I wouldn't say so.
Well, so for example, Cam has in the scale, so if a teacher puts in an A plus, the student gets a 4 behind the scenes, right? And then they get a 3 if they get a B. You can't add an A plus and a B together to get a grade, but the computer adds the 4 and the 3 together to get a 7 divided by 2, 3.5. 3.5 is an A minus. There's obviously other combinations that would occur when you average the numbers together. They're not all going to be quarter points. So what happens is A C minus is a 2.0 to a 2.12, and then it goes up by increments of 0.25 from there, all the way up. And then when you do a scale like that, C minus goes from 2.0 to 2.12, and then you get to the top, it's 3.88 to a 4 for an A plus. So that's what Cam's referring to, is how X2 averages letters together to get an overall grade.
Is that somehow different than when you do it normally, by hand? I mean, don't you, when you average two numbers together, the way
Yeah,
you
right.
average doesn't change, I mean,
It's just like the ranges, like the range for an A plus in the old system actually is 100 to 97. So if I got a 97 and you got 100, even though you did better, we both get the same letter grade. So there's a range there.
So I
Cam's
want,
argument is the 3.88. I think your argument would be 3.88 is too high of a standard. You'd like to see that range increased.
Yeah.
so if you could, do you feel it's currently a fair system?
Yeah, all in all, I
Okay.
think it's better than it was last year.
Well, that's a different question.
Yeah. Well, teachers are more on the same page now, so I think that's fair.
but you said it, a B and A is a 3.8, the highest.
Excuse me, say it one more time.
The range for an A, you said
A
was a three.
plus is a 3.88 to a 4. So when you average all the grades at the end of the semester, if your overall number comes up to between a 3.88 and a 4, that student would have an A plus.
How are those numbers determined for X2?
It-
Because this scale is 100 to 97 for an A plus. So that means that you're shortchanging them 1 point, correct?
No. It's different, you know what I mean? We're trying to compare apples to apples here. It's a little bit different because it's, the 4 goes on behind the scenes, the 3.75 goes in behind the scenes. When you average those numbers together, you need to create ranges for each of those letter grades for an overall score. So, I might not be explaining it well enough.
Well, I just wonder how many students would be caught in that .1, .01, or 1 point scale problem. Are we talking about a major amount of students?
Oh, I don't know.
Cam, do you have anything else you want to say?
Not right now.
Can you
Okay,
answer
so
my
I guess
question?
what I'd like to,
You think a lot of students are caught in that?
I'd say probably it's like you might be at like a 3.62 and you get an A minus, but you need a .01 to get an A. So, I mean, yeah, that does happen a lot in the system.
Would that happen in a 100-point scale?
Well, it depends because like in the 100-point scale, it was like if you had a 97.4, it would just round down to a 97. If you had a 97.2, it would round down to a 97. And if you have like a 98.9, it would average to a 99. Like, so, I wouldn't say as much as it does now.
Because I know I've had conversations with kids that were 89.4, and that would give them
Yeah.
a B plus, not an A minus, and you'd have that conversation
Yeah.
about a .01 again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
okay, thanks, Cam. I guess, first parent, Tracy Pappas, please. I'm sorry?
The light.
Yeah, Sandra, do you mind?
sorry.
Oh, that was.
Woke everybody up.
Yeah.
So as one of
good.
those older parents, actually, I did forget my reading glasses. But before I start my comments, this whole conversation, it's very confusing. It's all extremely, it's all extremely confusing. And I would like to talk about how this was sold, and I just want to say, however, my concerns are with the process, that it was not, I'm not taking a shot at Dr. Brown, because she wasn't here when the system was put into place. But I will say that a couple of points that were made. First off, this board was told it was required by the state of New Hampshire. The board was hoodwinked. I don't think it was done purposefully. This board was hoodwinked. I think that they might require competencies, but not within the grading system. That's huge. The other, I think, huge problem is that when this was introduced, there was a promise that everyone could retake everything. The district found that they couldn't do it. They didn't have the money. It was too much of a burden on the teachers. The other issue, one side was heard within the district. I felt that I knew there were a lot of teachers who disagreed with it, and they were stifled. I don't think that they were I don't think that there was anything overt, but it was quite evident to me. And I know from speaking behind the scenes that the opposition wasn't allowed to speak. That's not good governance. That's not good process. And I think that was wrong. To go back to my point about the grading system when it was first introduced, everyone was allowed to retake everything. Okay? In our society, we protect. I know I taught family and consumer science for close to 15 years before I started my family. We protect our citizens from bait and switch in consumer law. This policy is a bait and a switch. I don't think it helps anyone. And certainly, we have heard how it affects students on top. And those of us, we've talked about how much, a lot of the discussion when I've been involved in the past regarding this issue. A lot of the discussion was based on the top students. What about the kids on the bottom? They can't stay after, even if maybe some of them can. But there are a lot of, we have a pretty high, we have a high percentage of kids who do qualify for free and reduced lunch. And a lot of those students have to either go to work from school, if they want to go to school, or if they're trying to help out their families, or if they're trying to save money for themselves, or they might have to meet younger siblings on a bus. They've been totally left out of this equation. Our most vulnerable. And those at the top. You know, I've heard teachers refer to them as grade grubbers. I think that that's a really derogatory term that should never be used because they care about their grades. I think that that's absolutely deplorable. And I've also heard, I know I mentioned this in front of the full board, I've heard about how much time, effort, and energy the teachers and administrators have put in to this policy. And it's nowhere near your life's work, no matter what you do, is your family and raising your kids. And I will tell you, when I first started coming regarding this issue, there were a lot more parents who spoke about it. But I think they realized it fell on deaf ears. And I think there are some who, I totally disagree with this, that might be afraid that their children would be targeted by teachers. I don't believe that, because even the teachers that fully disagree with me, I believe in the professionalism of all our staff, teachers and administrators, and I don't think for 1 minute, that that would be, that would happen. I would also like I'm sorry I didn't look at the time, so I will go ahead and get through here. We have a lack of books. We don't even have books for our math classes. I think that makes it very difficult for the grading system. And in math, one can't take home the tests. So even if a parent wanted to hire a tutor, it makes it pretty difficult if you have to show up in school. And that, I think that's a I think it was an administrative or a departmental decision, not individual teachers. So again, I think that I think we should return to the 100-point grading system. I think it's more fair. I think it's more equitable. I think it will it's more helpful to the kids from the top, middle, and bottom. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Well, I'm sorry. So, Alexandra Norris. Just see if I can make this. I actually have a timer. Here, hold on a second.
Yeah, I'll be like 2 minutes. I have to leave in like 3.
Well,
So
that's
don't
okay.
worry.
It's not so much for you, Alexandra. It's
Yeah.
for us. Go ahead, please
All right.
start.
Alexandra Norris, 32 Edgewood Ave. Right now, I'm a high school student, soon to be just citizen of Nashua. I just wanted to say, I feel like I've been here like a bazillion times before. I was going through my notes today on my computer when I was trying to figure out what to say, and I realized everything I can say to you tonight I've said before. Talk about the levels of knowledge, how measuring that versus the number of items correct on a test is more beneficial to learning. Talking about how decreasing grade inflation is actually a good thing because it means that problems are being addressed and identified. About how with rubrics and course expectations now more than ever there is consistency between teachers, which is contrary to a lot of the things that I've been hearing. Talking about how like competencies have not hindered people from getting to college. Just looking at the list that Mr. Farrington read at the last full board meeting, I don't think my admissions into college was affected at all negatively by competencies or our grading scale. And going to information sessions for colleges, I've heard of grading scales and systems much more obscure and difficult to understand than ours, how colleges, like top-tier colleges, consistently admit students from schools that don't even have grades and different things like that. I've said all that before, and I think this time I need to take a little bit of a different approach. We've gone through this before, and I can tell you pretty much what is going to happen with this discussion. We're going to spend numerous hours tonight talking about the merits of this grading scale, taking a lot of time discussing it as a board, a lot of time with public comment. Ultimately, there's going to be a decision that right now, as the Curriculum and Evaluation Committee, we don't have enough information, and we need to push this decision to be made later on with the full board. So then administration will go and collect data which has been sent to the board when we've gone over this topic in previous times. They'll send the same information, and then we will have a full board meeting where we will talk about kind of the same information that we've talked about both here and before. And ultimately, I mean, I'm not saying how it's going to go down, but the motion to get rid of competencies usually fails by a vote of 5-4. So pretty much that is what I predict is going to happen. And I just want to say this change was made after much deliberation and research. It was not at all like a fly by the seat of your pants or an impulsive decision. It's backed up by research. A lot of time and resources have gone into making this decision, and I don't believe that reversing and going back to the way it was before is a good idea. Like there are kinks within the system, just like any system, and it's important to work those out, but kind of throwing in the towel and just giving up is definitely not the solution. And I just want to say that you, as the board, have the unique opportunity to affect lasting and positive change. You have the power to change the lives of students and, in effect, like the entire Nashua community. You can create policies to help kids read by 3rd grade, to help students with emotional disabilities kind of have a second chance and find like a place in school where they can kind of grow and learn. You have the power to like help students from disadvantaged backgrounds who like might not have had a chance without this school. You have the power to make all of that happen, and I hope and I implore that you stop revisiting this non-issue and use your power and authority to help students. Thank you so much for your time, and I want to reiterate that when I talk about the board, I definitely do not mean all members, but I want you all to remember that you definitely have the power to kind of make a difference and help all students be the best that they can be. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Graham, James
Can I
Graham?
just make a quick comment?
Uh,
Just a very quick comment.
sure.
The director of admissions at Harvard knew what they were doing.
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did. Good luck, Ms. Norris.
Oh, thanks.
Bye, Alex.
Is she going to Harvard? Oh, oh, oh.
Okay, my name's
Hold on a
James.
second.
Yeah, sure. Reset the timer.
Yeah.
My name's James Graham, 14 Iroquois Road. Before I start, I just want to let you guys know that when I started here, the grade scale between A and B was 8 points, not 10. So the current grade scale is actually more forgiving than the scale was 10 years ago. So it's important to keep that in mind when people say that this is hard for students. So at your most recent or at your May 15th meeting, there were 2 main topics that were discussed in regards to competencies. 1, how does this change how students learn and perform? And 2, how are students' grades affected? As far as how students' grades are affected, questions asked involved how can a student earn a B if they get 100% of the questions correct, or how come my student can't remediate in certain instances, or what happens to your grade in each system if you're getting B's consistently and then you start getting A's. The important thing to remember is all of these problems were problems before. The grade system didn't affect that. Really what it comes down to is teacher discretion and class expectations. Does a teacher have the freedom to determine how many assessments they plan on giving, how frequently and in what form they occur, as well as what method I would like my students to make up, retake, or recover that material? We try to be as common as we can, but every class is unique. My policies for an honors level Algebra 2 class will look very different to that of my ELL math class. Every classroom has a somewhat unique experience developed on top of a uniform framework. Competency-based grading did not change that. That's always been there. When I started in this district, it wasn't out of the ordinary to see a class that only determined 50% of the grade through demonstrating understanding. Things like classwork, effort, homework, and attendance filled out the rest, and while important, does not show whether or not a student is ready to move forward in their studies. We can also see the extent to which a student understands the material because it's rubric-based now in competency-based grading. Understanding is easily lost in traditional grading as the points from one question bleed into the points from another. No one cares about the individual holes in their learning if the overall score seems good enough, though. And the idea behind competency-based grading is that we can make sure students are not only achieving well overall, but are proficient enough in every pillar of the course. I don't want to fly with a pilot who can take off and fly, but is horrible at landing, and I should expect the same for my students. Students that memorize algorithms with no true understanding can't take a hit on questions involving communication anymore, because in our math classes, communication is its own competency. Most importantly, there's no room for providing credit for making a poster or bringing in tarts for the class, as Mr. Farrington stated last time. In the article he posted earlier, a student said that they did not like competency-based grading because it eliminated grade inflation. Yes. Yes, it does. That's the point. So, competencies are unpopular with students and parents because it makes students learn, and learning is hard. Kids don't like pushing themselves if they can help it, and parents don't like to see their children stressed. But stretching to one's limits is a critical element in the learning process. We also had a reference to a student's question at the last meeting, why do we have to go deeper into something when all that is being asked is to answer all the questions correctly? The reason is because that's how learning happens. You go past the bare minimum so that when information is lost during retention, the concept remains. And so while I've already addressed to an extent how this affects achievement, it's important to remember that even with competencies, we're still seeing students accepted in highly selective colleges. We just heard from a Harvard grad, or a Harvard, soon-to-be Harvard member of Harvard. Can I say Harvard? Yeah, I'm sorry. We also saw an improvement in our PSAT and SAT scores overall. which is one way to determine how helpful our new grading system is. When the path of least resistance does not involve gathering and handing in busy work, but instead involves actually learning something to a minimum level of acceptance, is it any surprise that our student performance would improve? I would imagine that with more time we will see better outcomes on tests like the PSATs and SATs, a smaller learning gap between high school and college, a lower number of our students required to take remedial classes once they get to college, and better outcomes in both college and career performance. We're requiring our students to eat their vegetables instead of diving into dessert, and they're becoming stronger because of it. So what is it that people are actually concerned about? And this is the last little bit, I promise. There are students and parents concerned that school is more challenging than it once was. Competency grading has changed how teachers are looking at their material, pushing students towards a higher depth of knowledge experience. That was the point all along. It was meant to be challenging. There are also concerns about inconsistencies between teachers, but no amount of change in the system will fix that. The wide gap you currently see is the difference between people who adjusted quickly and others that need more time. As a district, we will all get there eventually. We just need to challenge those who are doing well, support those who are struggling, and trust the system. We might not all be getting A's or A pluses for our transition efforts, but most of us are passing, and we're all more proficient than we were just a few years ago. Coincidentally enough, that's how competency-based grading works. Thank you.
Perfect timing. Thank you very much.
I'm gonna put my child in his class.
I'm sorry. Jason Tularsky, please.
Hi, I'm Jason Tularsky, 5 Shakespeare Road. You may have met some of my children in the past before.
Yes.
I really
I thought
want to.
they aged a lot.
Yes. So I guess first of all, I really want to thank the board for providing a positive and supportive environment for my kids to come and engage with the community, engage in the public policy process. It's really helped them develop as critical thinkers and engaged citizens. I value the opportunity that you all have given them. I appreciate that. Thank you. To the point of competency-based grading, as a parent, I appreciate the level of insight that the competency-based grading structure provides to me. I can see the breakdown of the skills that are being taught in the class and the way that my children are performing against those expectations. I get to see the content of the course in a way that I wouldn't otherwise, and I've given additional information to have more meaningful conversations with my children. I know precisely what they're being taught, the skill that they need to demonstrate, and how they're doing. I can, for example, see that certain someone needs to spend a little more time demonstrating proficiency in, ironically, public policy in the classroom. So having that additional level of insight to how my children are performing against those expectations is tremendously useful. Last year, one of my other children very embarrassingly stated in front of the board, the superintendent and his principal, that he doesn't do his homework. Fortunately, he had already been accepted to college at that point. But his point is valid, right? The path to demonstrating competencies varies from student to student and class to class. Without that insight from him, and also from which is made clear by the way the competency-based grading system is structured, with formative and summative assessments, it would have been a lot harder for me to help my children work through their classes, work through the problems, and I can give them more useful guidance other than saying, why didn't you do your homework, right? I mean, that's not terribly helpful, but being able to understand their progress against the skills that they're being taught and that they need to demonstrate. Every subject and every teacher is different, but one of the things that I find is that the competency-based grading system has provided a common framework for me to understand what my children are doing in the different classes. So I can see that there are indeed different competencies in gym for example, right? Who knew? But there are different competencies for PE, and seeing those called out specifically, I really gain a whole lot more insight into what's happening in the classroom. I can see that in a foreign language, speaking is coming along better than reading and writing, and so can have conversations with my children about how to improve there. What I like best about this is it really sets very clear expectations for my children on what they need to achieve, and it gives them feedback on a regular basis about how they're doing towards those goals. Breaking things out, summative, formative, all the different competencies, sets a very clear structure for expectations and for communication with parents. With such clear expectations and such a fact-based set of information coming from all the teachers and all the different topics, I find that my children are much more accountable for their performance across the full range of skills that they need to demonstrate in their classes than they have been before. And I think that they're stepping up to that. I can hold them accountable, the teachers can hold them accountable, and they can hold themselves accountable. So we can see with the breaking courses down into the different competencies, into the different skills that students need to demonstrate that they have learned in their classes. I get more out of it as a parent. I can help my kids in their classes, and we can all hold them accountable for the learning. Thank you.
May I ask you a question?
Sure.
I'm sorry. I don't use this too much, this timer thing. Everything you said is a passionate validation of the concept of competencies.
Yes.
You know, completely. And it validates, I never thought I'd say this, that maybe the legislators at the State House had a really good idea this time when they required us to I'm just playing, Elizabeth. But a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, folks. I love my legislators, don't get me wrong. But it makes the case that competency-based education, especially as you've described it and given examples for, really does add value to the educational experience. It helps the parents and everything. But this conversation is not about competencies and implementing them in the classroom. It's about how the students are graded on achieving those competencies. And I think, for me anyway, I think it's important to distinguish the two. And since I'm just curious what you think with that, my observation to what you said, because you spoke to competencies being a great way, the kids know what they're doing, you know what they're supposed to do, we're comfortable, they've achieved something and can embrace it and use it. That's totally different from how they're graded. This conversation is about the grading, it's not about if competencies are a good idea, we have to do that, that's law.
Sure. So I'm not sure I understand the distinction between the educational activity and the assessment of that, and the creating a structure for presenting the information and having an assessment model that evaluates achievement within that structure. I'm not sure I understand the distinction.
So if I have an assessment schedule, a rubric, which is what they typically use, and instead of it being, I don't have it up here, 1, 2, 3, 4 thing, it's ranges of 6 or 8 or 10, and it's in a 100-point scale. So all I'm saying is for me, I see the value of competency-based structure of course material, but that grading system is a grading system. And I just want to maybe have you think about that, because I'd be curious to have a future conversation with you outside the committee perhaps even. But that's another story. They want me to, their hands are telling me to move on.
Well, I have a statement. The only
Mr.
problem,
George was first.
Just as an observation, and I don't know how better to put this than if we invite people to come in for public comment, I don't think we should challenge them after they've made their comment. I think we should just let them make their comment and not have to defend it.
No, I wasn't asking them to defend, I was asking him.
Or engage them in debate.
Well, the board does that all the time, doesn't it, Mr. Farrington?
No, that's not true.
No, we do.
No, we've always not
I would-
responded to public
Point of
comment.
order, let's not fight with each other, please.
Let's move on.
Ms. Van Twyver, you said you had a comment?
No, let's go on with the public.
Okay, thanks. Next, student Joseph Pappas.
Thank you very
please.
much.
Thank you.
Hello. I am a freshman and I started at North this year. And honestly, I've just seen like a lot of issues with the competency system. Like
Could we have your name, please?
Joseph Pappas, you said it.
Thank you.
Yep. The first one is that the way they grade, you don't always have a clear idea of what the actual deductions they take are. Whereas they might say to be more proficient or whatever, be more proficient with distinction, but they don't actually tell you what you do wrong. You don't get like an exact deduction for what you did, so you don't really know what to work on. Another thing is that the way the competency grading works is that your final grade might not always reflect your actual skills in the class, because if you have more assignments in one competency and less in another, like there's no way to bring up this other competency that's not doing as well, so like your grade's not going to be as high as it would be if you had more grades across all the competencies. And another thing is, there's this whole presentation about all the numerical stuff. I've never seen anything about what my grades are numerically, and the students don't get to see that. So like we have no clue numerically how we're doing, if we're like on borderline going down, borderline going up. We have no clue about that. Another thing my mother mentioned is that you can't see the tests, so like how are you supposed to improve? You can't even take the tests home. Like I just don't see the point in that, because they don't want to make more than one type of test, so they make it fair for everybody. But I don't think it's fair that you don't get to take your tests home, you don't get to work out with like a tutor or your parents or something. Another thing is that every year at Nashua North we have students come from college, and they talk to people in the lecture hall about like college and high school and all that stuff. And it was mentioned how the competency system is just not what it's like in college, and like how it's not preparing you for college as well as the traditional 100-point system. And another thing was that somebody had mentioned how you have a clear idea of the curriculum, what the teacher's doing. It's honestly different on paper than it is in all actuality. Like they'll say they're gonna do this, it doesn't actually end up like that. Like it's kind of a joke. Like I just think that if they're gonna have this curriculum, they should stick to it, and it shouldn't be something that they say they're gonna do but they don't end up doing. And overall the system is just, frankly, everybody I talked to about it, some words that are in common are confusing. It just doesn't make sense. It's inconsistent definitely with what it is on paper and then what it is in all actuality. And at the last meeting they showed how the number of A's have went down, and so I just don't see how it's helping students, helping anyone out. Yeah, I just think that there's a lot of issues with the system, so many that like I just don't see the point in it. Oh yeah, another thing that I wanted to talk about was specify. So let's say I can remember one instance where on a math test, you might write a math answer as a point on a graph. I didn't put parentheses around it, so that didn't allow me to get an A+. In the 100-point system, a teacher might take off 1 or 2 points and then just like write, do this. I didn't even know what I did wrong. It just said that A on the test, no marks or anything. Whereas with this system, you can only get an A+ if you're absolutely flawless. So I just think that that's not very fair to the students. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't have any other teachers or parents. Ben Tulersky, please.
Ben Tulersky, 5 Shakespeare Road. So I was one of the students that was quoted in the article Mr. Kaufman read earlier, and I said the issues are not with the system, the issues are with inconsistencies between teachers. And inconsistencies between teachers are not a Board of Education issue. It's something for administrators and head teachers to deal with. So I don't see why the Board of Ed is concerning themselves with that. Also, students have always complained about the grades they get no matter what grading system is being used. But it definitely seems like since we switched, now students have something to point at and say, oh, I don't like competencies because they aren't getting the best grade they could be getting. But in reality, they just want the best grade they can get, and they now just have something to complain about. Also, there's not a complete set of data to be analyzing, because it was started at the beginning of last year, but you're talking about, oh, how many kids are getting into college? Oh, there's fewer A's. I think you should wait 4 years to have a complete set of data and then analyze it and decide what to do with it. Also, some people have said that you don't know what you need to do to get a certain grade. In my biology class, on every single summative, we get a rubric with which sections of the test or project or whatever apply to each competency, and then it has a description for if you want proficient with distinction, you need to do this, this, and this, proficient, this, this, and this, and I think that's really helpful to be able to know what you have to do to get a certain grade. So much work has been put into this that going back would throw away all the hard work by administrators, teachers, and student representatives to get the current system to where it is today. So I don't think this debate should be happening until we have a complete set of data, 4 years of a whole class having 4 years of data to be able to look at and decide what to do. And I don't see an issue whatsoever with grade inflation. I've definitely had to work harder this year to get the grades in my classes to get A's, but I don't see any issue with challenging students more than they have in the past. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to come forward and ask a question, please do so. Your name and address when you get here.
Hi, so my name is Samantha Bensavanga, 7C Taggart Drive. I'm a teacher at Nashua High School North. And I've just kind of been taking notes as I've been listening to people, which is why I didn't initially sign up. I wasn't sure if I was going to want to say something. So I just want to kind of point out a couple things from my personal experiences with this whole process. First thing I want to address was a comment made about the most vulnerable students being left out due to commitments, jobs, family obligations, not having transportation home. I absolutely agree, but I do believe that the competency-based system actually helps those students. Because now instead of overwhelming that student saying, you failed this entire test, I can now say to Johnny, this is the one area that we need to work on. Do you think that we can find some time to work on this one area? And it doesn't make them go, oh my gosh, I need to do this whole thing over and study all 3 of these chapters over again. So in that regard, when it comes to competency-based grading, I think that it actually could be a benefit to those students and not a detriment to them. The cannot recover a score above a certain grade, this was shown to us as teacher discretion. I, in my classroom, do not prevent students from obtaining a grade if they get a B- or higher. So I know that that could be different, but us as educators were presented with the option to have that. With that being said, I think it is important to point out that those sorts of changes in our approach were part of the learning curve as a teacher and also part of the learning curve as a student. I will say that there were students that were taking advantage of the fact that they weren't able to recover any grade. And it happened, what I experienced more often with those higher level students who are basically triaging their time at home. If they're taking 4 AP level classes and they have tests in 3 of them, we were finding that some students were saying, well, I'll just let this one slip this time and I can always recover it to the grade that I want. And so I think that when you're experiencing that, some of that might be, yes, teachers are overwhelmed and inundated, but I also think part of that is we're trying to teach the students that you do what you can and then you learn from it and you move on from it. And that's part of that competency-based grading. So I just want to point that out. As it's been said, competency-based grading is eliminating inflation. Yes, it is. I will say I still give multiple choice questions on my tests, and then I require them to explain their choice. So that's where the competency-based grading comes in. Yes, I'm asking you a question. Yes, I'm presenting you with multiple answers that could be the right answer, but getting the right answer is not showing me that you are competent, that you are proficient or proficient with distinction. That part comes in when you explain to me how you got to that answer. So that whether I know I'm not just copying, or I know that my student actually understands the process, and even if the process is the process of elimination, knowing what isn't the right answer, that's still showing me that they are competent in their understanding of the material, and that is how I assign their grade, not just on a multiple choice. How did they actually get there is where the competency-based grading portion comes into that for me. I also want to say, there's a lot of talk about this A+, you can't get it unless you're flawless, but isn't that what A+ means? Doesn't A+ mean you're flawless? So I just want to point out that it's no surprise to me as an educator that there are fewer A+, because we all know 25% of the population isn't flawless. So we're not going to see that all the time, and yes, you're going to see those decrease, and then once the students get used to it and they understand the process, then hopefully they'll start to come back up again. I agree that the competency-based approach sets clear expectations. This isn't only helpful for parent-student discussions, as we heard earlier, but it's also helpful for me as a teacher to come in and have those conversations with my student. I now know, and they now know, exactly where they have room for improvement, and once again, it allows us to focus our efforts and not overwhelm them with the stuff they've already mastered. It allows us to focus on where they can grow. I personally have never allowed my students to take their tests home. If a parent or a tutor came to me, I would always provide ways that they could study, but I don't necessarily think studying to the test is the way that they should study or they have to study. I understand the benefits of that. I am actually a tutor outside of my job, so I get that. I understand the frustrations as a tutor, but there are other ways to do that. Those are just some of the things that I heard throughout the evening that I wanted to come at with my personal experiences. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect timing.
Perfect time.
It's twice.
Anyone else like to speak? Some of our principals that took time out of their long day to join us.
No, I mean, if you guys have any questions or anything like that, I'd be more than happy to answer them as best we can.
Ms. Bastine?
The only comment that I wanted to make was, someone said something about the underserved students or the students that are struggling. That was one of the reasons that we put E-Block in place, is partly that reason is so all of the students would, regardless of what level they were at, would have an opportunity to get help during E-Block and try to spend some of that time recovering. So instead of staying after school, they do have that time to get that extra help.
May I ask you a question about E-Block?
Sure.
That's not germane. Is it grading?
Well, we use E-Block to help students recover a deficiency and a competency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's part of the discussion. You know, everything is a big piece, a small piece to a gigantic puzzle. So I'm just curious, do you feel it's effective? Is it working as intended?
I feel like we've had, I'm trying to remember the numbers that have recovered, but we've had, was it around 60 recovered?
Oh, I didn't bring the numbers.
I didn't bring the numbers. I know we presented the numbers before. Keith presented the numbers
I
before.
would say the students find it very helpful. In the same page in the Sunday Telegraph where you saw the Keeping Up with Competency, there's a positive article from the South students as well about how much E-Block has helped. So I think on that same page, there was an article, I forget who wrote that article, but how much E-Block has helped them. So I think from a student's perspective, it's been quite helpful.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else in the audience would like to weigh in?
I could if you want.
Well, no, I have some other, I have some, no, I've got plenty of time. I mean, no, I want to manage my time here. Get rid of this thing. Now the timer is overwhelming my machine. Let me kill it that way. Sorry about that, guys. Here it goes. So I received comments from one teacher who felt that E-Block was not quite useful, that maybe 15% of the students had advantage of it. And I do have a letter, and hopefully I picked the right one, which is not. It's this one. This was sent to the board, I'm sorry, it was sent to members of this committee, I think last night. And I would just like to read it. I've redacted this teacher's name because in it they ask to retain their privacy. Can you guys read this okay, or shall I make it a little bigger?
No, there's no way they can read that, I can't.
Oh, that helps. Okay. It's really not that long, but I would like to read it because this person really took quite a bit of time to express their concern about the grading process, etc. I'm keeping this brief, but I have to write about the competency grading issue you are discussing tomorrow. While this needs to remain confidential due to potential repercussions, and they are real, I'm a high school teacher, has been under this system for the past 2 years. I tried, I really did. Doesn't work. It has been a hindrance to student success in so many ways. Foundation students can't achieve them. Extension students can't keep up. Honors and AP students can't achieve the highest levels. We're not talking grade inflation, we're talking achievement. A foundation student who has difficulty beyond the basics is supposed to achieve analysis. They can't. They don't have the ability. If you drop the standard, you get accused. If you don't, the student doesn't have a chance of passing. Extension students frequently give up and just stop doing assessments. Honors and AP students who are struggling to get every point they can get for their college dreams, well, 1C at the beginning means they can't get an A+. In fact, more than 3 grades below an A- means that it's virtually mathematically impossible. Sorry, folks. I recognize that education isn't about grades, but about knowledge. It should also be about accomplishment. Sure, teachers can change them, but we're talking each student has 3 to 4 competency grades plus an overall grade. And then we can add 21st century grades and an individual comment. Each student has to be examined in 10 different ways, and that's at the end of the year. Midterm, we also need to add course expectations. Now, do this multiplied by 70 to 90 students and see how many changes you can make in a 24-hour period, which is all you're given. There isn't time. If it was only about grades, that would be sad. It's about communication. Grades should be a communication amongst parents, teachers, and students, the prospective colleges, and employers. In order to do that, we all have to speak the same language. A parent recently asked me why a student had an IP on an assessment. Instead of saying they got a 61 on a test, my response is that they failed to, quote, they failed to show proficiency on an assessment and they need to demonstrate it in recovery, end quote. The 61 is universal language we all understand. The second is educationese that the average person doesn't understand. It isn't a lack of communication, it's a different language. One of the most difficult problems with competency-based grading is the subjectiveness of it. Get 100 on an assessment in one class could mean a B in another class and an A+. With the B, the student can't even hope of getting an A or an A+ in the class, even though they did all they could. And colleges are supposed to understand this. More meetings to align this won't help, but will lead to endless discussion and debate and derision that is already widespread. Worse yet, this system means that students don't have to know anything, just be able to do a skill. It sounds great when a child is learning to walk. However, it means that a student who has no idea about World War I, World War II, Korea, or Vietnam can analyze the problems of the Great Depression and in a post-course recovery get full credit for the entire semester. Working this through other curricula and you can understand how this is a lowering of standards. There have been no benefits to this change to competency-based grading, only frustration, anger, bitterness, and stress. We need to return to something everyone understands, a simple 100-point scale. So, to the audience at home, when I receive an email like this as a member of the board, I take it to heart, because not everybody has the time to come down here or even wants to express an opinion. And I'll get to you in a second, Ms. Van Twyber, thank you. There's another piece to this, and it's a theme that we hear repeatedly in the district. I was going to comment on it later, and that had to do with the fear of reprisal. We have people who write emails to us and request anonymity because they fear reprisal. And it's a, thank you, Doris. And it's something that we've seen not just in this discussion, it occurs in other places. And we need to get that rooted out. And we did a survey last year, the climate survey, which helped identify some of the problems. But if we can't get parents and teachers and perhaps students to come to these open forums to express their point of view because they fear reprisal of a grade or an employment opportunity, a promotion, or an assignment, oh, you get the AP classes next year instead of whatever, then we're in worse shape than we think we are. Ms. Van Twyver.
Yes, I read that article, that letter from her, and I have some comments to make about it. She says, well, 1 C at the beginning means that they can't get an A+. Well, that's true. If you don't do well at the beginning, you can't get an A+. How can, I mean, when you average a C and an A, how can you get an A+? It's a B, all right? So I don't know what she was talking about that. And if a student had an A at the end of the year and a C at the beginning of the year, what happened at the beginning of the year? Did the student not apply itself? Or did the teacher not teach the right things? I mean, then she says, get 100% on assessment in one class could mean a B in another class. As one of our public speakers said tonight, that's not a board policy problem. It is a consistency for implementing these with the teachers. Let's see, she also mentioned the fact that all colleges going to understand competency-based grading. I want you to know that Nashua High School North and South have a sheet of paper that explains all about the school and the grading system that goes off to these colleges. So I don't understand. I don't think this woman has read the policy on grading at all, and I think that maybe we ought to put this policy of grading in every school classroom.
Mr. Farrington?
Yeah, I think that our principals here tonight and everybody else would agree that there's more work to be done in competencies. We still have to refine them and all that. And when we get a letter like this, we obviously all look at different parts of it and different things catch our eye. And the thing that catches my eye as a board member and troubles me is paragraph 2, a foundation student who has difficulty beyond the basics is supposed to achieve analysis. And then the next part troubles me. They can't, they don't have the ability. And if this board doesn't find a problem with that statement coming from one of our teachers, this board has a problem. If our teachers don't have a higher expectation for our students than that, and I'm not going to mention the teacher's name, I'm glad, in a way, I'm glad to hear this, I guess. But that causes me a great deal of concern. A great deal of concern.
Mr. Frederickson?
I'll be honest with you, I didn't hear anything after that sentence, once I read that sentence. Because there shouldn't be anybody on our staff, I know that believes that. Because I have seen time after time, where regardless of what the level is, if we have proper instruction, kids can achieve. Okay, to say a kid that's a foundation student can't achieve analysis, that's troublesome. So I didn't even read anything beyond that. I'm sorry, I'll probably have to reread the letter later on, but I'm really disturbed by that particular sentence, so.
I wouldn't call her a credible.
Mr. Richard?
I don't mean to attack her.
I don't
just
really care at this point,
We
but.
did not attack anybody, we didn't attack people we tried not to when they came up to us. Let's talk about concepts and try not to focus on any one individual, please.
Mr. Richard?
I think Competencies has set up a structure. Before, we honestly did not have a structure to our grading prior to this. The teacher had full autonomy over what categories they would grade for their own classes, the percentages of those categories, because I'm hearing a lot of those inconsistencies. If we want more inconsistencies, throw this structure away. And it's just that we've had conversations lately, the past couple of years, about grading that we've never had before, so things are coming to light. Mr. Kaufman, you and I, previous to this, could be teaching the same class, giving the same test, and you might think some questions are more important, you might count them as 5 points apiece. I might think other questions are more important, I count them as 10 points apiece. Same test, same knowledge, but because they're sitting in your class, they might get a better grade than mine, because I think these questions should be, have more points off. And the way we do it is just deduction, minus 10. And that was the feedback we would give back. As we move to a rubric-based system, and how, Ben had talked about, as he takes that assessment, he knows what proficient means, he knows what proficient with distinction means. We're trying then, you and I teaching the same subject, given the same assessment, the experience is going to be much similar. There's less inconsistencies in that model than there would be if we were just open to do what we wanted. Somebody had talked about how, we are pretty much assessing our students on the skills and content of each course. So for the first time ever, teachers across the board in the same subjects are assessing the kids in the same categories. We never had that. When I was teaching, I could create my own categories. I had student participation. We were at 20%, 1/5 of the students' grade. And I feel bad about it now, but I've learned a lot. At the end of the semester, I would look at what the student handed in, how much work they did, and I would come up with a number. There's no way to have data to really student participation throughout a 90-day or 180-day when we were on a 7-period day, to have data to show the kid. If the student ever challenged me on it, I'll be honest, it'd be really pretty hard to say, yeah, you got an 80% on student participation, here's why. Yeah, you were late a couple times, you didn't always get your homework in on time. I hear our kids talk more about assessments in school. I mean, I can't believe how many kids talk about formative assessment and know what that means. Summative assessment, and how that's the big time, that's when their chance to perform. I have a student right now too I feel guilty about. When I was teaching at North, he never did homework but aced all his tests. He never got a good grade in my class because I held that against him. He didn't need to do his homework, he knew it when he walked in the door. I wasn't challenging him enough. And unfortunately that student received a bad grade. I issued it. I can tell you his name, I remember where he sat.
To get a big job?
Yeah, I mean, I hope
Probably
he does.
works at Harvard now.
But it's awful. You know what I mean? We are doing a better job with our assessments. Are there inconsistencies? Yes, because we created a structure for teachers to follow, and there's always those different cases that are going to happen based on the kids in front of you, and it's a learning curve for our teachers. So I just, a lot of the issues I'm hearing are grading issues, not Competency-based grading issues. They were there before, but we never talked about them because we didn't have a structure to bring people together, and now we are. So I just think if we go back, I mean, it's the wild, wild west of grading, because you just go in your room and you set up your own structure, and who is to question it? So if Cam comes to me and says, Mr. Rich, I need help, I can't believe I'm being assessed 75% on tests in this class and 50% in class participation on this one, I would have no leg to stand on and say, well, here's our structure. Because it would just be about, every classroom would be their own silo of a grading structure, where now we're trying to build a high school structure. So I guess that's just my 2 cents.
No, I appreciate it, and I'd like to ask you a question, because you just opened up a thought to me that I perhaps didn't understand before. I mean, I see the value of the competencies in the rubrics and establishing a consistent standard throughout the grade for that particular course for all students. But for me, the issue here is not about doing those rubrics. It's sort of what I asked to Mr. Tolerski, had to do with what number system do you use to quantify the achievement in those rubrics? Because that's where I see this discussion. I don't think anybody here is trying to, we can't, it's state law. We need to follow state law. No, we're not trying to take away all that hard work, the rubrics and everything that was done. I thought, to me, the discussion is about, is it a 1 to 4 scale, or is it a 1 to 100 based scale?
And what I'd say
so that's where, no, but that's where I am. That's why I'm bringing this forward, because I hear about confusion. And I'm seeing a number that could maybe get rid of that confusion, that people understand 1 through 100. So that's why I'm here, that's why I'm encouraging this conversation to occur. Please.
Research shows that the less boxes that we can put grades in, the more consistent we'll be as teachers, right? So if we have 11 points, 11 grades that a teacher can issue, if we were all to sit down and grade a paper together, blindly, not, you know what I mean, there's a better chance that we'll all kind of end up in the same grade than if we said, grade this paper between 0 and 100. I mean, research shows that the less categories we have, the more consistent our teachers will be. So that's why when you open it up, I'd just be concerned, then you'd have 100 boxes to put the different, do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
I hear you, but it doesn't make sense to me because we have a range of, we know there's a range of score for a particular level of achievement. 3.8 to whatever, 3.7 or whatever. And that would, if you're in that range, it would map to an 84. So for me, I believe there's a grade mapping from one to the other. And I wouldn't see 100 boxes. I'd still see boxes, I still see rubrics, and if you're in the middle one, you're in this range, and in your upper right one, assuming the best achievement is to the high right side, then you'd be eligible in the A category, and its variance there. So that's why, I mean, I always enjoy the conversations I have with you, and I think when we listen, we got a much better chance to understand. So, Dr. Brown, you're the only one on this side of the room so far that hasn't weighed in. So I'm giving you a shot.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed the conversation, and I too am struck by the sentence. And I was thinking about the goal the board set back in November about having kids read on grade level in 3rd grade. I don't remember the board saying that some kids would read if they had the ability. I don't think that it was qualified that way, so that's disturbing to me.
Anybody in the back, last call?
I already spoke, but if you wanted to talk about the numbers versus competencies, I'd love to. I'll be very short.
Okay, so that's 2 minutes, right?
Yeah, I could do it less than that.
And I have a timer. I
Yes.
can actually impose that.
Okay, so.
If I can find it.
Sure.
Go.
Okay, so as far as the actual numbers go, and this goes to what I was saying before, the fewer boxes you have, the more accurate you can measure. You mentioned that, well, yeah, but I can find a range, like if it's somewhere in a range, you'll be fine, right? Like that's the point you're getting at. So the problem with that is when you're doing that, you're unofficially moving towards the system that we already have in place. I can tell you what proficient with distinction means in detail for something I give versus proficient versus partially proficient versus in progress. But they reference the 61. What does a 61 look like compared to a 63 or a 67? Like, they're all still in that range you were talking about, but it's going to affect the average. And yeah, over time, if you have enough assessments, sure, it'll average its way out, but it will in the other system as well. Except I can actually articulate why I picked the grade you did, whereas you can give me a range of like 5 to 7 points where somehow it was. And if you happen to go on the high side on a kid multiple times, because, I don't know, they're one of those kids that's easy to talk to, and they smile a lot, they do all their work and all that stuff, maybe I'm going to skew things just not even thinking about it. They're in the same range, but they're on the high side. And there's this other kid that annoys me, and for some reason I always put him in the low side. I don't mean to, it just kind of happens. Over time, that's still going to average out poorly for that kid who's not on the good side, as opposed to the first kid we talked about. So it overall, like over the course of a semester, yeah, it'll average out if you're doing it on a 100-point scale, and it should roughly work its way the same. But for individual assessments, which is what we're talking about here, the 11-point scale versus 100-point scale, you really need these broader groups so that you can say exactly why it is the way it is. So.
Thank you. Mrs. Ziem, do you have a comment?
I've been sitting here thinking about this, and it's been at least 2 long years of discussing competency-based grading. And at the last vote that we had on it, I was the tiebreaker. And I started out very much opposed to competency-based grading. I did not like it at all. Everybody knows that. But I have to tell you, if you listen to our educators, which I like to think I do, if you listen to our parents, the majority of our parents, and I'm not saying all of them, and I try to listen to all of them, but the majority of you seem to be sold on competency-based grading. And so we've done it. And so to keep revisiting this makes no sense to me, and especially when I don't see the votes changing. If I saw the votes changing, then I would say let's revisit that and take a vote. But if you don't see the votes changing, then to keep revisiting it is an exercise in futility and frustration for all of us. And so, from my opinion, I would say that unless we see that vote changing, we need to let this rest and move on to bigger, greener pastures. That's my take on it.
I'm just trying to go around the room as a summary kind of thing. Ms. Fulton is back. I promised her that at 7 o'clock we will resume with her portion of the program. So I'm just want to let everybody know I'm trying to respect that. So Ms. Van Twyver?
What?
I'm trying to give everybody at the table an opportunity as a final comment. So that's why I'm calling on.
I have no final comment. You know how I stand from the very beginning, so I have no final.
Okay. So, Mr. Farrington?
Yes, after Mrs. Zeem's comment, I know I should just leave this dog alone.
You probably should.
But I want to correct her, it's been almost 4 years.
Yes.
You were talking about this
No
before
wonder it was more painful.
before I came to the board.
Yes.
But just in the interest of balance between, we had 2 teacher inputs, I think, today, and 7 sentences I wanted to read from another teacher. I want to let you know that I have had a real positive experience the past 2 years with competency grading. Assessing in this manner allows teachers to give valuable feedback to students on specific target areas important for academic success. I've been teaching for 20 years. The assessments I am creating now enable students to achieve a higher level of knowledge. I have never thought more of assessments and grading than I do now. I feel like the assessments I am creating now are rigorous, equitable, to students of all levels and abilities. The expectations of each assignment are made very clear to all students of all levels, and then it explains he is not able to be here this evening, but I think that illustrates that there are teachers with lots of different views.
Mr. McIntyre, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to say one last thing about competencies. I'm just going to use an example that my Spanish teacher gave me. In the previous grading system, she would ask a Spanish 1 class a question. What do you have for lunch? And one student, let's say I answer ham. Another student, let's just say Mr. Richard answered, I have ham with my family at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and I also have milk with it too. Me and Mr. Richard, we would both get 5 points out of 5 points. We would both get an A+ on that assignment. Now, my answer was not near an A+. That was very basic. His was
my answer.
Your answer was way above and beyond. It was crazy good. But in the previous grading system, there wasn't that distinction. You know, if you answered 5 points out of 5 points, me and him got the same grade. But now, if I answer ham, I'm gonna get a C and he's gonna get an A or an A+, whatever. So competencies, it almost gives it a sense of realness to it. Like, it almost shows you what you need to do in the world to be successful, and it gives you more of those in-depth experiences that kids do need to have for the real world. Life's not going to be a ham response. It's going to be more real in a way. So that's just why I wanted to conclude with.
Thank you. Ms. Hohensie?
I'd like to move to make a motion. It's long. And then because I don't want to just talk to why. Make a motion and then I'll speak to it if I get a second. I'd like to move to restore the traditional grading system in our 2 high schools, which respects and preserves the contractual, quote, right and responsibility of teachers to grade pupils, unquote, restores the 100-point back-end arithmetic calculator, maintains the traditional A+ to F grades on student reports cards, requires a grade of 70 or higher to pass a course, and may include a recovery process for incomplete or non-proficient work at the discretion of the teacher.
Second.
His motion is about reversing the grading system, which has failed our students and failed to bring our teachers, our parents, and our community together. One of the biggest problems I see with this whole process is there's only one side that's consistently coming out and speaking, And then there's the other side that's dormant and silent and afraid to come out. The survey we took was, I mean, it was overwhelmingly lopsided in favor of the traditional grading system for parents and students, and even the majority of teachers. And we didn't have the contribution of both sides. As a board member, if we're denied both sides, then we're not really having a good open discussion. This district has to resolve that problem. We can't do anything if we can't allow our professional teachers to speak out without fear of retribution. So that is our number one problem. I see this grading as inequitable. I think it was promised as something more than it determined to be. And remediation shouldn't be called grade grubbing, it shouldn't be called triage. You have to have a system, and it either works for everybody or it doesn't. I think it doesn't improve the learning. I think that there is a morale problem for some students that are thrashing at the high end, trying to get better grades, and sometimes the students at the low end have problems. But I don't think a hardwire straitjacket of a grading system, whether it's a 2-year or 4-year pilot, is going to improve anything. I think keep the competencies, keep the rubrics, continue all of that because we have to. But we've got to look at something that brings everybody together and that everybody can work with, and I just don't see this as doing that. We had a 100-point system where students could get all kinds of different numerical grades, and they were transported back into the A+ to F. But now what I'm seeing is with this new system, we're getting two grades are going up, proficient and not proficient. You're losing A's, you're losing C's, because they're recovering to a B, and the A's can't make it quite up to the A, so they're going to the B. We have 40% increase in B's, and there's an increase in F's. So you're either proficient or not proficient. To me, I'd like a little bit more calibration, and I don't see this as giving it, and that's why I made the motion.
Ms. Van Twyver.
It doesn't say, Mrs. Hohensee, that the opposition has come out to talk about this, so I find it to be amazing that you still hang on to the fact that there is a lot of opposition. Not one, 2 people maybe I've heard, that's it. And I will vote against this motion once again.
In the interest of time, I just assume call the question. Without having to read the whole motion, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
So 2-1 carries recommendation to the board. So what I would like, it's 6:58, I'd like to adjourn this meeting. Actually, no, I need to recess. I want to take about a 5-minute break, if I may, and then we're going to pick up with Mrs. Fulton. Ms. or Mrs. Fulton? So we're reconvening the curriculum and evaluation meeting at 7:05. I'd like to welcome Mrs. Fulton to talk about the Title I grant. We had some questions at the board which tabled the discussion, which brought it here for some clarification around the curriculum implications of the Title I money. And I would just, at least the members of the board received a memo from you, so we do have that background information.
Okay. Do you want me to talk about it, or would you like to ask me some questions that maybe came from your memo or before the memo?
Well, if you want to speak to it first, and then perhaps we'll have a question, or...
Okay, the grant is, I have to follow many rules that the state puts out when you get a grant. And so I didn't know if there was some, a little bit of misunderstanding, because when we get carryover, which is usually late winter, early spring, it would be wonderful if we could put on more employees for the following year, save the funding, but it must be spent before the school fiscal year ends. So when I think back on when we got the carryover, some of the things we did immediately was we did put a tutor in place at Ledge Street. They wanted an additional tutor. Again, that's a little sticky because it was only for the 6-month period, if even that, and then it would end her contract will not go on because we don't know if we'll get that amount of money again. This is just kind of like frosting on the cake. We also picked up a half-time social worker at Dr. Chris because that's something that they had wanted to use with some carryover funds. So we quickly did that, and we were able to do that quickly because I noticed that there was a social worker that had been hired at one of the high schools. I believe it was North, I think. And she was part-time, so I called Dana and said, does the woman want to work, you know, a full-time position? And she did. We interviewed her, and it worked out that we were able to grab her very quickly because the hiring process does tend to take a little bit of time. But again, she's only hired for the remainder of this school year. She won't be back. And I know you know the saga of what's coming down the road, I believe, with the budget, but I'll go over that in a minute. So there are some things like that with carryover that we use. We also have some obligations. So one of the things that the Title I budget does is pay for the school choice transportation. That's very expensive. And when the grant comes out in August, and I look at everything that we need to spend that money on, I don't have enough for the full school choice transportation. So I'll put in half of it, and then I know that with carryover I'll pay for the other half. So that's another expenditure that will come out of that. The other thing too is homeless has really kind of taken a bite out of the budget this year. Many districts match the homeless funds that the Title I budget puts in for transportation. We've covered that completely with Title I this year. So we have, I needed to put in an additional $40,000 under the transportation line item for homeless, which means the money that Dave Rossio needs to put in a bus. Because we do bus from all the different sites like, you know, the Motel 6 and other places where some of our families are placed. But we also might have to bus from Manchester to here or from another town. When we do another town of busing, we often split it with the town. But that isn't always the case. It's a courtesy. Sometimes people do and sometimes people don't. But we're obligated to get our child to our school of origin. So there's that. And then the other thing we decided to try this year, which was quite successful, I think, to save us some money, is that instead of putting more money, even more money into the busing of homeless, we started a fund of $20,000, and then it went up to almost $70,000 for gas cards, taxis, things that we could help parents with so that they could drive their children to school. So that's been really very expensive, and it's something that the Title I budget has taken, gladly taken over, but it's been an expensive part of the budget. So there are those kind of things that are hidden in the grant. All of the schools, we make sure that they get all their supplies, everything that they need, nothing that will supplant. So I can't buy something that the district already buys for schools. So if you say Eureka Math, I cannot buy Eureka Math because that's something that the district has to take responsibility of. I can buy something, though, for the Title I schools that would help Eureka Math along, or help a math program to help those students who are struggling with that program and working with our tutors. So when I say that we have carryover, I don't want you to think that it's just spent however. Each school has to do what's called a Title I school-wide plan. And they put this together. Their very first plans began a couple of years ago, and they put those together. They're quite extensive. I think they're about, I want to say about 20 pages long. It must be staff members, teachers, admin, and parents, very important, that all come together and they say, you know, they look at data. There's data in there. And there's all the different things that they want their school to do and to improve on and to help their children. Then every single year that has to be redone. So I'm just collecting them now. I have 2 schools that are still owe me a school-wide plan, but those school-wide plans kind of turn into wish lists, if you will, because not only is all the data there and how the school's doing and what the school's, you know, doing for the children, but then they'll say, if there's carryover, we wish we could have X, Y, and Z, and this is why. So we want computers because we want to do this with our children and we want to help them. So when I go in to spend carryover, I really have to look at the school-wide plan, and the state looks at it. So the state says, you know, she's asking for this money. Is this something that the schools wanted in the first place? And the answer is always yes, because we're very careful to keep our school-wide plans up to date and current with what the principals and their schools feel they need to help the children make progress. So there's that piece. I didn't know if you were aware of that. And I have an example of, I just brought Mount Pleasant's I didn't want to kill a tree, but you're certainly welcome to take a look at it. But it's quite extensive. So that leads us to this upcoming school year. I am still waiting. I've been promised now for 2 weeks that we would have a new amount of money for Title I for next year, and we have not heard anything yet. The rules have changed, which they do periodically in Title I, and this year, when we get our funding, the very first thing that has to come off the top are our private schools. So I have been going to 11, we have 11 private schools in our district, and one of those is actually not in our district. It's Presentation of Mary Academy in Hudson, but they have Nashua students. So I go to each one personally, and we sit down and talk about do they want to consider taking some funding from Title I. Then I give them most of the private schools don't have free and reduced lunch like we do, so I have a form that they can send out to their parents and get back with income information to see if they qualify. Then after I get that back, no names, I don't want any names, but I look at an address to see if it matches to a Title I school. So I might get a stack of 15, but if I look at the address, there might only be 5 children who actually would attend one of our Title I schools if they were attending public school. Then I take those and I look at which school it is, and as you know, when I look at the distribution of funds page, each of our schools are ranked. Dr. Crisp is our highest poverty, then Ledge, then Mount Pleasant, then Amherst, and then Fairgrounds this year. Each of those schools gets a certain amount of money, Dr. Crisp getting the most, and then so on down the line, per pupil. I take those per pupil costs times however many children are from Fairgrounds or Ledge, and add that all up, and that is the amount of funding that I can offer services for to the private schools. And I say that because I don't want you to think we hand them a check. We do not do that, but we can ask them if they'd like to take services or materials. So for instance, this year at Presentation of Mary Academy, Nashua has a tutor. We hire her, I supervise her. She only sees the Nashua children that are at Presentation of Mary Academy. And then I bought her a few things, you know, like a computer program, some other things like that. They must spend the money. So that whatever that money is, they need to spend it before the end of this school year. And then we're in negotiations again to see how many students there will be, and we start all over again with the new distribution of funds page, because our schools change in their poverty. They move around. That being said, this year, Presentation of Mary Academy, St. Christopher, Infant Jesus, and Nashua Children's Home will all be taking money from the top of our grant, from the very first figure that we get. And then we'll have to take off some percentage for priority school. Then we'll need to take off a little bit a lot for homeless. Then we'll need to take off school choice transportation, but we're almost done with that because we're fading that out. We're in the last of that. I think that's everything. Then I can look at our schools. So I just wanted you to know that's where, and I follow the regulations so carefully, because again, if we make a mistake, I am very fearful that we could lose a percentage of the money or all the money. They're very, very careful we have a very strong checks and balances. We're very careful at everything that we do. Anything that I send first to Glennis, who checks my numbers to make sure that I've got them right, and then they go to the state checks them we have a Title I South Central coordinator, and then their treasurer checks it. So there goes through all these checks before we get the okay that we can spend the money.
Ms. Van Twyver.
I have 3 or 4 questions, if you don't mind.
Please
I'll
go.
be quick about them, so that I understand what carryover funds are. Last year, if you had a budget of 100,000 and you spent 90,000 of that, are those the carryover funds?
The
that you-
$10,000 would come rolling back to us, yes.
That's our money, well, sort of our money, but you
It
know
is.
what I mean.
Yes.
All right, so I don't understand why we don't pay for every, use that money up in the same year.
Well, because I count on it for other things, and that's what gets me a little worried. So I'm a overly cautious person, but we count on it for summer school. There's no money for summer school until that carryover gets placed in, and summer school is quite expensive. There's not enough money to pay for the school choice transportation, so I count on that to come back. So, and sometimes salaries change, and we had, for instance, I believe it was last year, it might have been the year before, as I got everything all built, then the union settled on the new contract, and oh my gosh, I had to inflate all of the salaries, so I had to have that. So I'm always got to have a cush that kind of carries me over.
Okay.
But that 3-year thing was a fluke, right? Okay.
Let's not talk about that.
Okay.
All right, school choice, busing for school choice. I thought that's only for Title I students, or is it for the whole district? Because I thought we discussed this in policy with Mr. Conrad, that eventually we would not pay for children who go to school, who have school choice.
I know that, I don't know the answer to the first part of your question, but I do know that we are phasing it out. So the only thing left in this upcoming year that I need to budget for, we haven't taken any new families. So in other words, the 5th graders, I think, are our last group that we're transporting, and then as far as school choice, that it's away from the Title I budget.
Okay. Well, I just want
I
to
think
point that out.
Excuse me, I think there's one more, I think
Is it
next year
2?
will be the last.
The
year.
last year, that's what I
Yes.
meant,
Yeah,
as soon as I
okay.
budget,
Yes.
yeah.
So
I'm
that
already
will
thinking
be
next
less
year.
than your expenses for next
Yes,
year.
yes, about 162,000 is what I've been paying.
You
in
answered
Title
my
I.
question when we were talking, my concern about the private schools, like the Catholic places and all of those private ones. Why do they get money first before our students? I don't understand that.
It's the latest.
The latest?
ESSA
ESSA?
has come up, and with our new regulations, that we were handed a new pamphlet of this is what will happen.
So refresh my memory what you said. Do they get an unlimited amount of money?
No,
Because
I need to look at their students to see that they live in a Title I area.
Say there's 5 students there.
Okay, and let's say that all 5 would go to fairgrounds. So we give roughly 1,000, 1,200 to each fairgrounds per each Title I in fairgrounds. Those children get about that much per pupil cost.
Okay.
So then I would give presentation to Mary, say $6,000 then.
I'm glad you mentioned about the school program of how they want to spend their money, because I was not aware of that at all. That it's not like you just have this bundle of money and
we
you
just
give
go for it. Yeah.
Go for it.
No.
You have to consider the needs of each school
Yes.
and what they're asking for.
Yes.
I think that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Hollowell?
Yeah, I was just, so the busing was exactly that. We started to phase it out over time, right? So it's a kindergarten, we were keeping it for families that were already there. And it is only, it's because it was school choice from Title I schools that allowed people to move. So those are the ones that got busing. Nobody else got busing.
But
if you could get a variance, but if you got a variance, you had to figure out how to get your kid to the school.
Right, okay, thank you. You refreshed my memory.
Mrs. Eam and Ms. Sorensen.
What are, if at the beginning of the year, like I understand that we're losing 5 Title I teachers, is that correct?
We've riffed them. So the positions are there, but I've reduced the budget by $197,000, broke my heart. But I'm afraid of what's coming down the pike any day now when we find out about the new funding. And I'll tell you why. Because we're looked at when they choose the funding. It'll depend on how the state is doing with enrollment with students. So you run that gamut that maybe New Hampshire won't get as much money. But when they look at Nashua and they look at our 5 title schools, they're going to look at our poverty level. And for some reason, our poverty has slipped down instead of increasing or staying the same. It's gone down a little bit.
We have less poverty?
Yes.
Less free lunch, right?
Yes,
So
less
we're not
free and reduced
44%
lunch.
now? What percentage are we?
42. But that's overall as a whole district. So the title schools are what we're going to look at for funding. And where Dr. Crisp has always been 82%, top of the most poverty, they're now in 3rd place. This coming school year, they're coming up at 70, I want to say 75%, but I'm not sure. And Ledge has moved up to the top, but they're not even as high as they have been before. And then Mount Pleasant has actually increased. And then Fairgrounds Fairgrounds was in 4th place this year, and they've fallen to 5th. So we've moved our numbers a little bit, and also there was some suspicion over the federal government. What are they going to give Title I? I was sweating it out for a while this year, the last 2 months or so. There was rumor that the federal government was going to fund, I can't think of the term, I'm so sorry, but it was a budget that would pay for retroactive May 1st to October 30th, and that's it. So they would give us a portion of our $3.7 million, they might have given us $1 million. So we would have had to sit down at the table and said, what are we going to do with that? What are we going to fund? Are we going to let people go in October? Are we going to go? So there was a lot of that. I have now heard that that's probably not the case, but no one knows, and we're waiting.
So if at the beginning of the year, August 1st.
Yep.
I assume, so August 1st or August 1st of last year, you knew how much money then that we were presumably going to get.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, could we have, instead of buying these Chromebooks, could we indeed have paid for teachers?
Well, I would know in the sense that, because the carryover is what paid for the teachers. So I didn't know I will never know what the carryover is being dumped in until roughly the end of February is about when we get it. So when we're given this amount of money in the beginning, in any day now, let's say in June, we get this amount of money, then I'm allowed to budget 80% of it, but I also have to pull out 3.2% for indirect costs, because you have to be really careful. So there's a little gray area there. And we hire our teachers, and we take a look at the poverty level. Everybody gets material money and workshop money and book money if they want it, so that's all fair. Then in January or February, money gets dumped in, and then that's when we look here. And we say, did you want an extra teacher? Did you want Chromebooks? What did you want?
In January, is that what you said?
February probably.
So is there a list somewhere that tells you exactly what that Title I money can be used for?
Oh yes, there's books and
So
books.
books, no.
I know, it's confusing.
You're telling me I have to take a 50-page
Yes,
document
you
and
do.
look at every
You
page?
do. There's quite a lot of books that say what can and can't be.
I know the federal government was in this.
There's a lot of what can and can't be. We can't supplant. Like, in other words, like I was trying, what I said.
A teacher would be supplanting?
No, a teacher would not be. And for the most part, we want to hire the staff and the personnel if we can. Yes.
My understanding the other night was the board was very concerned, some of the board members were very concerned that we could use this money for teachers and we were using it for Chromebooks instead. So I would like to hear your response to that.
The 923,000?
How you feel plus or minus about that?
I feel like it's two different topics, if you'll bear with me, because we take our funding and we provide about 80% of what they give us for staffing. And that's about as much as we're allowed to do, because you always have to have that little safety net, if you will. So we fund that, and we've got our staff, and we've got paras, we've got teachers, we've got coaches, we've got so many staff. So then put that aside, that we've got that money and we're using it for staffing, then we get this extra amount. And at that point in time, it's pretty late to start putting more teachers in and then tell them that they got to leave in 6 months. That bothers me. So at that point, we go to these and we say, you've got the staffing you want. What else are you looking for? So LLI kits perhaps are replenished or bought for reading. Chromebooks, if, you know, Imagine Learning, if they want to take a computer class and use that. So it's kind of two different things.
Do we need that many Chromebooks? I mean, I went, for instance, I went to Charlotte Avenue, and of course I was in Adam Marcou's class, and he had a full complement because he did your
Donor's
program
Choice.
there, and Donor's Choice, and he got 100%, I'm pretty sure. So do we have a need for that many Chromebooks? Like, was there a $900,000 expenditure last year on Chromebooks?
$923,000 and a few $100.
Thank you.
I think that in order for our Title I schools or any of our schools to compete in today's society, yes, we do need
No,
that.
what I'm not
But-
asking you, what I'm asking you is, if we have, for instance, 500 students in Title I, do we have 500 Chromebooks currently, or do
No.
we have 330 and we need another 170 more, and this is gonna pay for those 170 more?
This extra that we're coming to you for should finish everything out, and everybody, I'm not sure it'd be one-on-one Chromebooks, but enough so that most children would have a Chromebook or an iPad to be working from.
So you're telling me, if I understand, I'm not trying to put,
No,
I'm just
I
trying to make
understand,
sure I
yeah.
understand exactly what you're saying. You're telling me that we are not buying surplus, we are just buying sufficient to cover each child having a Chromebook.
Yes.
And that money was 20% of the total, because that 20% federal regulations wouldn't allow you to spend anyway.
Under 15%. It had to be under 15,
15.
yes, yes. And
So
I
there
think,
was a 5% gap there, is that what you're telling me?
yes, and I feel like our goal in this, when you look at this, when we talk to the principals, as we all talk together, the 5 title principals, the goal was to help the districts so that would free up technology money that you have available that you were going to spend that year, but it could now go to non-title schools, because there's nothing I can do with the Title I funds for non-title schools. I wish there was. So it's our way of trying to get everything we need so that the money can then be pushed into the others as well. But we didn't buy extra. There's no extras. Please don't think that. We're not like hoarding them in the closet. It's enough for each child.
No,
I know.
And please know, I appreciate, it's not, I'm not
I
challenging
know
your
that,
integrity,
Sandra. I know,
absolutely, I
no.
wouldn't do that.
No.
I'll get you.
I just wanted to be sure that thank you.
You bet.
But
So thank you,
923
Mrs., excuse me for a second. So I do want to give Mrs. Hohensee a chance to speak to this, but I do want to ask Mr. Farrington for the next meeting. Can we just keep this conversation going? We close down at 7:30 and resume the next meeting and continue the discussion?
Well, when
'Cause-
as soon as the next meeting starts, we'll have the motion. If Mr. Moser has missed a little of this conversation here, everybody else has said that, I don't intend to repeat it, but if there are further questions, yeah. I mean, because that's all this next meeting is about.
Okay, so I'm trying not to encroach on the next meeting. I see it's really a continuation. We'll just run a little bit over, finish up as soon as we can, and then open it up to your next, okay, just point of clarification. So Mrs. Ziem, did you get your question answered?
I'll wait now. I do have enough, I'll wait. Thank
Okay,
you.
Mrs.
Thank
Hohensee?
you.
I just wanted to thank you for coming, because I know you've got a new job as a principal and you're down doing 2 jobs. So I'm very appreciative of your expertise and taking time to come to our meeting.
Give me a second and then I'll call on you. Similar to Mrs. Hohensee, your command reassures me, okay, and that's important to me. I do have a question though. You mentioned that they have these, I want to use the right terminology. They have a school-wide plan.
Yes.
And part of what they do in there is identify their wish list for potential carryover expenses. So is it generally the case when you go out and shop, when this money now becomes available, you're picking and choosing off of those already predetermined lists?
Yes, I have to do that because now the state is getting more cautious and careful about looking at those. We're about to have, next year we'll have what's called an on-site visit, and we've survived one of those with me, so the next person will have that to do. And each school has a notebook that we've put together, and in that notebook is every single thing the state will be there to look at that particular school. So in it is this school plan, and when Mrs. Bubness comes in, she will open up that and say, okay, you've purchased, I see that, through the grant, you've brought these things, is this in your school-wide plan? It is, okay, you're fine. So I'm really careful that everything matches exactly so that we don't get into any trouble with this purchasing. They won't actually approve the carryover unless it matches and we know what we're going to do with it. So they're very, very careful with that. And not only will we have next year, just a heads up, not only will we have our 5 title schools and our preschool on-site visit, but now we will also have those 4 other private school visits. So she will actually spend 10 days with us next year to going over this with a fine-tooth comb.
Thank you, Mr. Hollowell.
So one thing on the private schools is this is when people talk about private schools doing everything cheaper and better and faster. They ignore the fact that we're helping them do it cheaper, better, and faster by not having to spend their money.
Good point.
I think I heard you say, well, let's just ask the question. On average, what % of the money that you're getting is being spent on technology, whether it's buying Chromebooks or computers or?
Well, that would depend on what the carryover is, because we don't buy anything. We've never bought, that I can recall, we've not bought any technology off the main grant.
So it could never exceed 20% because
Never.
you've only got 20% left, but it probably has never actually come
15,
close.
yes, exactly.
And maybe it's because I know you've been doing this for a while, and so I know you have command of this, that I was not concerned at the board
thank
meeting
you.
or at the finance meeting.
Thank you. And something that was interesting, and I almost appreciate this because I went back to take a look at it. I thought to myself that the technology was about with the 15% carryover. But we buy it, we have so many other things that we use that carryover for that it isn't even 15%. So just to think about that a little bit, it isn't even that much, so.
And then I'm curious because I see Mrs. Oden isn't here. Was she planning on coming to this?
I understand she's ill.
Oh, okay, because I know she was the one who had the questions. And I guess I thought we had decided to have this discussion at the 7:30 board meeting, so I was a little shocked to come in just a little after 7 and find out we're in full throttle mode of Title I discussion, so would have preferred it had been held to the meeting that everybody said was gonna come.
I have one more question. We had a discussion at one time, you said that you thought the state was going to be pulling more money away for public, not the public
Private
schools, the charter schools? Do you have any further information on that?
I don't. The only thing I do know is the state has now an office of charter schools, so I don't know. When I go to my South Central meetings, which is all of us that belong to a certain area in New Hampshire, we do have 2 charter schools now that join us. So I don't think that from our funds will be, charter schools will be, taking anything. It's just the private schools.
That's
And
good
really,
news.
they don't get that much, but it does add up. It really, it does.
Thank you.
What I would like to do, if I may, I guess I can, when the chair will ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you. Second,
Yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Van Twyver, all in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, 7:35 PM. Thank you. So we are adjourned, and we're gonna roll right into the special meeting, Mr. Farrington.
Okay, so we'll call this special meeting of the Board of Education to order at 7:36.
I don't have a book.
I got it already here.
Oh, good. No, he's gonna take it. That's all right. Do I have the book? No, he'll take it.
It's Monday, June 5th. We're at the School Administration Building. And for roll call, Mrs. Oden is ill, Dr. Murataki is out of town, Ms. Van Twyver.
Here.
Mr. Hollowell.
Here.
Mr. Mosier.
I'm here.
Mrs. Zine.
Here.
Mrs. Hohensee.
Here.
Mr. Kaufman.
Yep.
Mr. Farrington's here, and we also have Dr. Brown, Mr. Frederickson, and Mrs. Fulton. And we are here for a single purpose this evening. Do we have a motion, Mr. Hollowell?
Move to take from the table a motion to approve the purchase of technology for Title I.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Zine. Any discussion? Mr. Mosier, you missed some of the conversation. Do you have anything you'd like to,
This
have
is
any
just to
questions
take,
about?
this is just to take it from the.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. thought we were gonna zip right through
You're
this.
not
Thanks for the
anxious, are you?
I was looking to set a record.
Would have been a record.
All those in favor of taking the motion for the table, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Discussion on the motion.
No, we already voted on that motion. You need a new motion.
No,
The motion's sitting on the table
Motion's up, we got
now.
it.
Oh,
The motion before the board is recommendation to approve the purchase of technology, Chromebooks, iPads, and projectors utilizing Title I funds not to exceed $246,000.
Second.
No,
it's
it's there.
already
No, nothing a second, it's there, we just
It was
took it
a
off the
tabled
table,
motion,
so
we took it
it's,
off the table.
it's before us.
now.
So that's why I say,
Oh, I'm
discussion.
sorry. Yeah, we do this so often. I forgot.
Mrs. Z.
I would like to ask Mrs. Fulton how much the total budget for that was last year, the Title I budget.
Our Title I budget last year was $3,600,967.90,
And of that $900,000,
which was carryover from 3 years.
oh, it was from 3 years.
3 years
Was
was
we
our,
allowed to carry it for 3 years?
once every 3 years, you can do that. We did it, now we have to,
Oh.
we can't do that anymore for another 3 years.
That is the strangest thing.
So, and it's hard to understand then, I guess Mrs. Oden's concern, and I shared it with her because I thought it was a good point, was that if we can be providing classroom teachers, then that should give us that should be our first priority, because I believe the teacher is more important than the technology even, and I say that, I recognize that technology is important too. So, but it's hard to know how that $900,000, you're saying that this year, if I understand you, you're saying that this year, approximately 20% of the $3,600,000, was it, is what you had rollover?
About 15%, yes.
15%.
Yes, yes. And so from that, let me just say that to address Mrs. Oden's concern, when I'm given the Title I allocation any day now, I hope that it's about 3-point-something million. From that, 80%, first, as we talked, the private schools will be off of it, the homeless will be taken off of it, the priority school will go off of it, and so what we have left, we will staff. And if we'll bring those teachers back if we can, the RIFT ones, but we will staff everything we possibly can with the remaining money. It's what we always do, although we haven't had to take as much private school and as we have before. So that up to 80% is what they allow, and then with and also 3.2 indirect costs. So all of that will be used for staffing. So we do use as much as we can for staffing. If the principals decide in their school-wide plans that no matter when the carryover comes, whether it comes in late February, March, they want more people, we can certainly do that, and it would be reflected in their school-wide plans. At that point, we can hire someone, but that person would only be with us until June 20th.
And may I ask you on the homeless, how many homeless there are now? I know that fluctuates.
It does, and I hate to say.
What portion of that money we gave approximately? I understand that,
Yeah.
I don't expect you to.
This
put
year,
a
well,
penny.
no, and this year we gave 19%.
19% of the 3 million? So 600, considerable money.
It was a considerable amount, yes.
And was it 168, or what are the number of homeless people we have?
I don't know, and I would hate to say, I think it's well over 200, but I'm not exactly sure the number.
Okay.
And it does fluctuate. You're
Yeah,
right.
it's
It tends to be really, and we do a wonderful job in Nashua of food pantries and clothing pantries, amazing. We help out with furniture and things. It's the transportation that is so expensive. The other thing you need to be aware of too is Title I funds are now being tapped for foster children who are placed in a foster home, let's say on Friday, they're placed in a foster home.
Emergency.
Title I funds must be used to get the child back to our school on Monday morning. And until we can get the cooperation of both school districts and, the foster home and whatever's best for the child, we pay that transportation fee. And transportation is expensive, as you know.
And that foster home doesn't necessarily have to be in Nashua.
The first one was in Manchester that we dealt with this year.
All set.
Thank you.
Mr. Howell?
Yes, this is a general question. So we have the 5 Title I schools. What's the 6th school, and is there ever any possibility that they would swap places? Like, I assume
Oh, I
we
see
do
what
it
you
by
mean.
the 5
Mhm.
highest free and reduced lunch.
We do. A long time ago, it was decided that we would do the elementary schools because we felt like that was where the
Right.
need was. So it fluctuates and they change place every year between Birch and Sunset. Birch and Sunset, they go back and forth. Just when Phil thinks he's right there, he's not, and then Mark jumps ahead. So it's it's got to be 40% or more.
So are
and they're
there
on the cusp.
some years that the Title I funds go to Sunset versus?
It hasn't
Birch?
happened yet, as long
Okay,
as
that's what
I've
you're
been here.
saying is-
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. They haven't quite made it to the 40.
But I think someone said today that in history there had been a time when Sunset Heights had been on the list.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, they definitely
Before
said
me.
that.
And is there ever a possibility, so why is it 5 schools as opposed to 6 schools?
Well, the 5 schools do have the poverty level above
above the
40%. So it has to be above 40%. And so Sunset or Birch, whichever one, is like 38% or 37%. So they really can't. The middle schools could qualify. I think they're at 40-something%, but before me, it was decided that it would be the elementary schools because it would dilute the money too much if we started spreading it out really thin. So
And then I think as I came in, you were talking about the homeless and the program to provide gas cards.
yes.
So you said that was a big success.
A success in the sense that a school bus costs us $54,000.
Right, but didn't you say you spent 70,000 on?
No, I upped it to be sure that we had enough money, and if I'm almost afraid of what we would have spent if we hadn't had the gas cards to give families. And so instead of saying we're going to give you a bus to come and pick you up at $500 or whatever it is, we've sent a taxi or we've given a gas card.
Okay.
Like currently, we have a case right now where we're helping a family in Manchester because there's only 2 weeks left of school.
Mm-hmm.
So we're doing taxi because it's cheaper than everything else at this point.
Yeah.
Ms. Antoine.
I am going to vote for this, and I apologize for raising concern at the board meeting. But I am concerned about the amount of equipment that we buy. And I don't believe that we have an inventory in this district of every piece of equipment that we have. Back in June of 2015, Mr. Farrington said it would be useful if at some
Mr.
point
Franklin said, okay.
we talk about having an inventory system that identifies these computers when purchased through the operating budget. And now I assume, I also would request that the Title I budget be, I really like to have a detailed accounting for the $923,721.52 that we spent for Title I. How many Chromebooks we bought, or whatever other pieces of equipment that we bought. That's a lot of Chromebooks, as far as I can see. So I'd like to know what that money went to.
There you go.
Oh, very good.
And if I
Mrs.
could,
Fulton, please.
and if I could just say, and you're welcome to come and take a look at our notebook. So I have a very large notebook. But every item that is purchased that is over $100, I have a sticker on it. And I have the sticker number,
It's
the
an inventory
corresponding.
number?
It's an inventory number.
Is it
and-
put on by Mr. Fahrenkoff?
No, well, no, it's my numbers from Title I, they come from the state.
Oh, from
So
the
the sticker
state.
says Title I, property of Title I, and then an equipment number. And then that is entered into a book, and then we spend months tracking down to be sure that if any equipment is broken, that it's taken off the list, or we go find out where it went. It's a huge process, but we do it every year.
Well, there should be an electronic piece of equipment, an electronic program that will do that for you, so you don't have to hand do it. But ever since I've been on this board, we have bought equipment, and we do not have an accounting for it. I would like to see that happen sometime before I die. Thank you.
We'll put that on the calendar.
Might be soon, so
Yes.
watch out, Mr.
Yeah, if you
Farrington.
could give us an estimate, just so we can kind of.
Well, I'll let you talk to my doctor.
Mr. Cochran.
Thanks. I actually thought Mr. Fahrenkoff knew where everything was. I mean, in the conversations I've observed during finance, I mean, he seemed to me to to know exactly what it was, 8,142, talk about trivia, I kind of remember that number. Anyway, my question for Ms. Fulton is a piggyback question from Mr. Hollowell. When he asked, you mentioned that other schools, perhaps middle schools, might qualify for Title I. So there's a trade-off between, in other words, we have 5 elementary schools. Could we have 5 elementary plus 2 middle schools? And then you have a total pool of students, and based upon the allocation that you would get Title I, would that be how the number were calculated? Or is it just some cap that Nashua gets and you can only, in other words, if we have more eligible students, why are we not leveraging it?
Well, and that's a question that was before me.
But it's
so
the same amount of money.
It's the same amount of
We
money.
don't get
right?
any
So
more money,
we
right?
wouldn't get,
Even though the students are
No.
a larger number.
when they look at Nashua, they look at all of our numbers, and then we get
So
an
they look at
amount.
the 11,000?
Mhm.
Okay, they're not looking at the number
Just our
of
5,
qualified students. Okay.
yeah. Yes.
I have a question, it piggybacks on that one. If we added a middle school or two, would that give us the flexibility of spending the money in those schools, maybe at the end, after the 5 elementary schools are taken care of, or would we have to proportionally spend it?
We'd have to proportionally spend it. So
Okay.
they would be put into the pool and equal. We have to be so careful.
So that,
Yeah.
you're
And
creating
I
a
even,
whole-
like, most of the years, my budget is within $1. And I know that sounds, but I just wanna make sure we get all the money we can to all the schools. So Chris might get $1 more than Ledge and so on down the line. But that's what we would have to do,
So
based on their
it would
poverty.
create a nightmare with the solve or give us
It would,
any
it
more
would
flexibility.
thin the pot. It would really, it would. But
Thank you.
Mrs. E.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that because we're going to be hiring a new director of Title I services, I think this meeting is very timely because it gives us all a perspective as to some of the knowledge that a person in that job needs to have. And I will take this opportunity to publicly thank you, as Mr. Kaufman did, for your services to Nashua. And to tell you, I'm glad you're staying in Nashua.
Thank you very much.
Don't go away.
And I will help this person definitely, because this takes time to learn.
Yes.
It really does, but there's a lot of great support, a lot of other directors of other towns I get together with, and so there's a support system, but I will be there as well, so.
Thank you.
Ms. Hall?
Just on the inventory, so there is an inventory, I know, because I've seen it. It's a rather large Excel spreadsheet that Mr. Fahrenkopf has. At one point, I think there was an issue, if you had a Google Chromebook, there's ways that, because the machines are on the network, that they can tell the machines are on the network and they have an ID associated with them, and so they can track them that way, so they know what's online. The Google Chromebooks, I think there was something about them that they didn't have something that allowed them to do it for the Chromebooks, but that was a couple of years ago.
They bought a different model or something.
Does it include Title I, or is it just?
It's all, he has
No,
everything.
Title I
He has,
is
he
it.
has
Title I is
everything,
it.
including anything that's been purchased through Donors Choose. Like,
Okay.
he knows where it all is.
Well, but that's not
Right.
Donors Choose, that's,
I'm just saying, he knows where everything is.
He does all the purchasing, so he does know it all.
oh, okay.
Yeah, and if I could just put a plug in for my amazing and wonderful office manager, Kathy McIntyre, because when we took over, it was all written. The inventory was all handwritten. She has now painstakingly taken 4 years to enter it into a computer program, and we do have that available to us where we can eliminate and put in. Beautiful job. She's amazing. So I want to give her kudos for that.
And if you go to our budget book, in the presentation from IT department, it's got an inventory that shows you by school how many desktops, laptops, Chromebooks. I don't know exactly the date that was done. I don't see that on there, but there is an inventory. So, but
Talking about a computer program that does it all.
no, I understand. Well, I think that Mr. Howell spoke to that. Mr. Mosier.
I needed that many stickers.
Thank you. Yeah, I had 2 things that have been on my mind. And the first one has to do with the Title I funding, which you do a fantastic job, I must say. We have the 5 schools now that receive the Title I funds. If we had to expand it to a 6th school or more, that would water down the amount of money that would be available to the 5 schools, right? We really don't wanna do that. Because the 5 schools now, with their needs, with the students that we have there, and the equipment and the staffing, we don't want to water down what is available for these 5 schools, because it's very important for them, because these students are going to be moving up into the middle schools and into the high schools eventually. And if we water down what is into those 5 elementary schools, that means that we may have a disruption in the learning process that has gone into these students when they do move into a middle school or into a high school. So, that's one thing that was on my mind. And the other one was in the idea of the inventory. Now, apparently what we're doing is keeping 2 inventories. One, which is all of the material that is brought in through Donor's Choose, and that is purchased through our operating budget. And now we also have an inventory, which is all of the equipment that has been bought by Title I funds, which is so indicated, right? It's all marked. So this, been bought by Title I funds and things like that. So I think that it's a good idea, and if you could put this into a spreadsheet with just the raw inventory, so that would be easily accessed because it's all in numerical order, which would be rather easy to do. That would be acceptable for everything else that we look at for Title I equipment and where it has gone to and how much it costs, so that we have an idea of what it is. Now, I know over the past 12 years, and the time that we have all been, on the school board, Bob, myself, and Mrs. Ziem, we have had many discussions on Title I and the funds that have come in and the stuff that have been purchased by that and the staffing that is, because we're always looking at the Title I staffing and to see how it can be manipulated over the 5 schools. And it's a good thing that we're not spreading it out to other schools, because then we would have less teachers in the elementaries and be moving Title I's into the middle school. So is this, my thinking on this correct?
Mm-hmm. And we also keep in mind too that the 5 schools that we fund, their poverty level is, the lowest is 74%. The next closest to that is 38. So there's a big discrepancy. Not that Sunset and Birch don't, they eventually they could get there and they would deserve it, but we are really funding the highest poverty that we have in the district.
But what you're saying is that you have to have 40% or more.
Yes.
To qualify. Very good, thank you.
So, well, now I have 2 questions. Are there social workers that are funded under Title I that may be going away?
So there's Dr. Crisp asked for their carryover, or a portion of the carryover to get a part-time social worker. So we piggybacked off of one that I think Keith had hired at the high school that was doing part-time for him, and then we took her for the other part of the time, so she's now full. That's the only one that we pay for. Ledge and Amherst have social workers, but they're through their grant that they wrote through Ceresk, and it doesn't have anything to do with Title I funding. And Fairgrounds has one that they purchased with their priority grant. So yes and no.
Sorry, somebody sent me an email, so I'm just looking. Okay, yeah, that's.
Mr. Kaufman, thanks. I appreciate it, Mr.
I'm sorry, I thought Mr. Hall was there.
Well, so, and this is just a future concept since you know so much about this. Let's say we were to redistrict the entire city and make everybody have 42% free and reduced lunch. What happens then?
Well, we would get funding for that percentage, and it would be
'Cause
very
it-
watered
'cause it-
down. It'd be,
So the Title I is triggered off of the overall
yes.
free and reduced lunch calculation?
So if we did that, it would be pretty, like, it would be very watered. Like, maybe every school could have one tutor, or they share a tutor, or, you know, it would be,
But could you decide then which schools you wanna pick? Or does it have to meet some criteria?
as far as I know, you could decide, as long as they were over 40%, you could decide which ones you wanted to fund. So you could fund 5, 3,
Yeah.
2, but you'd have to, I think you'd wanna be so careful, because, you know, someone would say, well, they're getting funded and they're 1% more than us, so. it
Yeah,
would be
it's
a
just
little-
one of those things I've
yeah.
never really thought about. You could redistrict yourself out of, like, concentrating funds, right?
Yes.
But it would be, it seems to me it would be a fairer way to do it, because then every child who is in poverty, because a child doesn't go to one of the 5 title schools, doesn't mean they're not in poverty, and doesn't mean they don't have as great a need. It just means that they're not gonna reap the benefit because they don't happen to fall into that particular, that's always bothered me, because I don't see that as being equal. I don't see that as being fair. But I understand what you're saying about watered down. You have to have enough money to buy. You can't cut the computer up into 3 pieces and give one to each school.
Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you. So the allocation scheme makes a lot of sense. Obviously, the people in the highest need are getting the most money, and you've concentrated it, and there really is a huge difference between that. But what if one of the middle schools all of a sudden found itself at 50 or 55%?
We'd have to have
And
a
you-
discussion.
Okay.
We would, because I don't think that this is cast in gold, that it's always these 5 schools. It's just the 4 years I've been here, it has been those 5 schools.
So
And
moving
there's been such a
demographics could
disparate-
really change things around, because you'd wanna go well, obviously a discussion, but you probably want to think about servicing the area with the highest need.
And there's been such a discrepancy between that, say, fairgrounds and the next school down, even middle schools, such a big difference.
No, I'm saying if they ever caught up
Yes,
and they're
yes,
in
then
that
we have to talk about that.
striking distance.
Most definitely.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so the motion is to approve the purchase of technology, Chromebooks, iPads, and projectors utilizing Title I funds not to exceed $246,000. Before we vote, just because the conversation has run in so many different areas for anybody who may be watching, this is money that is left in the budget this year in the Title I grant money. It's not operating budget. And it's a situation where if we don't expend it for purposes of our own students, we will lose it. And this is to put the technology in the hands of our Title I students.
And it represents 3 years, not 1 year, right?
This one
No,
only
this is 1 year.
represents 1.
Yep.
The 900,000 was 3.
And it's
Okay.
carryover
misunderstood
funds,
then.
Yes.
correct?
Carryover
Yep.
funds, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Voice vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. It
Move
was
to adjourn.
unanimous. Move to-
Second.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
all those in favor of adjourning say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned at 8 o'clock.